All right, we are recording. Yeah, like I said, everything's in a little different place. I'm just looking for the icon that says, yes, we are recording. We are recording. All right. Here we are. This is just this, Richard Rohr, 48 or so episodes. We're going to be starting tonight on page 70. Everything that is. Nice round number, page 70. And before we jump in, anybody have anything they want to bring up from the book? Anything that we didn't quite develop enough? Anything you've been thinking about during the week? These next two sections, we'll probably only get through one tonight, although maybe we can get into the second one. I'm really getting kind of nuts and boltsy. I'm finding as this chapter goes on, he's getting more and more into kind of the nuts and bolts of the contemplative experience. See if you feel the same way about it. But yeah, just really talking about details, experiences, issues that come up as we're trying to enter into contemplative practice. So, all right. Nada? New? Okay, let's start on page 70, everything that is. Do y'all remember Julian of Norwich? Do you know who she is? She's a She's actually one of the first female doctors of the church, considered a doctor of the Roman Catholic Church. She's English, so she was living in England, and this would be what, 16th century, I think, 15th, 16th century. Um, just, poor peasant girl living at the time of the Black Death, the plague. Her whole village was wiped out, just completely. And she survived, of course, but so many deaths. I think it wiped out 60, 70% of the village. They couldn't even bury the people fast enough, so they just put them in piles outside of the village. And that, of course, really affected her. She became very ill herself. It's interesting how mystics, a lot of the beginning of their mystical practice, or the intense first experience that they have with God's presence, comes through some sort of illness. You see that over and over again, an illness, an imprisonment, some real intense and suffering that kind of kicks them into another level or dimension. Francis of Assisi, both illness and imprisonment, kind of got him moving in different directions. But Julia of Norwich, same thing. When she was older, she agreed to be an anchoress. And I don't know if you've heard of this practice. It's kind of bizarre, but an anchor or an anchoress would be someone who was willing to be walled up inside the wall of the church. And they literally would wall them in, and they spent the rest of their life in this cell, this enclosure. And it had an opening on the inside and an opening on the outside. And on the inside, they would feed her, of course, and service her in that respect. On the outside, it would open up almost like a confessional to the street, where people could come up and talk to her and get counseling and and get prayer and connect with her. But her whole life was dedicated to that space and to that church. And so she spent the back part of her life as an anchoress in the church there. So, but she is one of the great mystics, and because of her writing, I was considered one of the first female doctors of the church. So she's a big figure in Christian mysticism. So when Lady Julian of Norwich looked at that little hazelnut and said, and this is hearkening back to the last section that we read, and she wrote about this kind of mystical experience she had just looking at a hazelnut in the palm of her hand and realizing that nut contained everything that is, and everything that is was in the nut, and the nut was in everything. And she just had this sense of complete connection. So when she looked at that little hazelnut and said, this is everything that is, I think she meant that one authentic relationship serves as the only real doorway to a relationship with everything else. Or as I have learned to say, how you do anything is how you do everything. To encounter one thing in its gratuity and uniqueness is to encounter all of creation along with it. An authentic I-thou relationship with one thing opens a universal doorway. How you relate is how you relate. Contemplation is really the art of full relationship. It is learning how to relate to reality in an immediately appreciative and non-manipulative way. The contemplative mind does not demand, it is not needy, and is not easily offended. It allows other things and people to have their own voices without trying to impose its own agenda on them. It takes a lifetime to learn this, it seems. A daily practice of contemplative prayer will help you to both allow and trust an overwhelming gratuity from outside yourself. It then offers you the safety, this validation, and the courage to relate to everything else as a gratuitous gift, too. Someone who allows and trusts in this way is characterized by both deep gratitude and deep contentment, which we usually call peace. All right. Any initial thoughts? Anything jump out at you?
I like the statement, how you do anything is how you do everything. So you do something for love, you do everything else for love. Yeah.
Sounds like a song lyric. No, that's great. That's one of the standout lines, obviously. And when we get there, we'll talk a little bit more about it to see if you actually agree with that. Because you don't have to, you know. Anything else? Okay.
Dave, I'm gonna jump in real quick before
Jump
you get
in.
started.
Absolutely.
I'm reading this and it says, or as I've learned to say, how you do anything is how you do everything. And my brain's firing on all cylinders and telling me that's not so.
Okay.
That we do many things in a variety of different ways based on the situation and the circumstance and the environment and a lot of variables.
Okay.
So what am I missing here?
Well, let's go back up to the top and let's get back to that because that's one thing I wanted to discuss with you to see if you all kind of agree with that statement and how we can at least use it to our advantage contemplatively. So he
Okay.
says when Julian looked at that hazelnut and said that this is everything that is, he says, I think she meant that one authentic relationship serves as the only real doorway to a relationship with everything else. I remember telling people, I used to get a lot of opposition for this one, or at least consternation, I suppose. I said, your relationship with God is only as good as your worst relationship with another person. And people would just kind of flip out on me, you know. And then they would say, oh, you know, someone would come in and say, you know, my sister hasn't talked to me for 15 years. I said, well, that's not your worst relationship. That's her worst relationship. You know, you can't account for what other people do. What's your worst relationship? And the point that I was trying to make is that, you know, the unforgiven relationship, the one that actively triggers us and angst, the one that we stare at the ceiling at 2:30 in the morning thinking about, that forms a glass ceiling over our heads. And it kind of shelves us off. You know, that's pretty much as good as it gets with other relationships because when you defend yourself, you know, that wall that you put up, that shield that you put up is not discretionary, you know, it's a
Mm.
wall. So it walls off everything. You know, we would like to say it's selective, but it's not. So if you're defending yourself against this, then you're automatically defending yourself against other things as well. It shelves us off from the complete connection that we're really after. You know, he says that his relationship of contemplation is the art of full relationship, full connection. And so I think to start to answer Scott's objection, You know, if there is one authentic relationship that serves as the real doorway, the only real doorway, he says, to a relationship with anything else, he's talking about the quality of that relationship. Our ability to really be open, transparent, vulnerable, undefended, right? Our ability to be that willing to let people see who we really are is going to define the way that we relate to people in general. Now, obviously, you know, we have inner circle and outer circle, and we have significant others, and we're going to show certain people more than others. But remembering that a lot of what drives our unwillingness or inability to be open and transparent is unconscious. We're not even aware of how our relationships are being compromised because we're not aware of the mechanism of what's causing us the fear that is creating the need for defense. And so, yes, we're being compromised all the way around. And so I don't know. I agree with you, Scott. This might be this last line, how you do anything is how you do everything, might be overly broad, but it is pointing back to a point that he's making here that I think is valid. And the one that I was trying to articulate by saying, hey, your relationship with God is only good as your worst relationship with another person. Because just like Jesus said, you bring your gift to the altar and then remember that you got something against your brother. What good is that relationship with God expressed as sacrifice at the temple in some sort of ritual if your relationship is compromised? Because that compromised relationship really is the character of your ability to be undefended and to be connected. And so go first, fix that relationship, then come back and express your ritualistic relationship, your relationship with God. And so it's pointing us to really take a look at the broader spectrum of the quality of our relationships and to be able to identify those in 12-step speak, steps 8 and 9 that we need to identify as those that are still damaged, those that we may need to make amends to, and how do we clean up those relationships to the best of our ability on our side of the equation. But I think that's what he's pointing to. Scott, is that making it make any more sense to you?
Yes, sir.
You know, and I guess more important than making sense, is it something that, obviously can be of value to you going forward in terms of contemplative practice and I suppose just daily relationship?
I think so. When I take in the information as you explained it, I get a feeling like the important thing to remember is the the key way you conduct yourself in your relationships. That there's a defining way that you, when you're being honest with yourself and with others, that doesn't change from relationship to relationship. That honesty level, that integrity level, that ability to be sensitive to the moment doesn't really change.
Hmm.
It's the same with each and every person. So if I understood you right, that's what I'm getting from it. Does that seem to be on target?
I like it.
Okay, well, then I'm happy I brought it up.
It kind of goes, that with the how versus the what.
Yeah,
I'm ranting on that all the time, right?
that's a good
So
one.
that idea of God's will not being a what, we're obsessed with the whats. We want to know the details and we want to know the path that we need to take, but God doesn't give us any what. And it's frustrating to us because in our fear and our uncertainty, that's what we think will be the salve, that'll
Yeah,
soothe that uncertainty. But what he does give us in spades and is screaming off every page of scripture and, as Paul would say, from the creation itself, is the how, you know. And that how is going to instruct the what. No matter what we choose, we're right in the center of God's will and presence with the right how. And so if that how is consonant with Jesus' how, then we're going to be right in the center of God's will. And so our ability to connect with people, our ability and our value of connection is going to define everything we do, from the job that you go to every day to the quality of your relationships. And you will be finding the task within the task with that how. And so the how becomes a universal piece. that then regulates all the different whats. And I think that's also what he's getting to as well.
Agreed.
I'm also getting this sense of a couple of things, but like I think of how we're all connected too. So I mean, just in our relationship and our connection with one person, knowing that God is or having an understanding that God is within all of us and that all of us are within each other in a sense. We're all connected that when we're having a relationship with one person, we're also expressing um that with everyone else at the same time, knowing that we're all the same. And then there's also this sense kind of that comes to me that when we do how we do anything is how we do everything, like um just in the moment, when we're doing well, on the one hand, there's this panentheism concept with God being within and without everything all at the same time. And then there's um where inside of our bodies we do one thing at a time in one space, um yet also seeing each other and other people, but like just how we do that one thing at a time, like in the present moment, and mindfully is going to reflect on, I mean, if we can't do it in the present moment, then we can't do it tomorrow, and we couldn't do it, I mean, because tomorrow really never comes. So I mean, it's just like there's only that present moment. So there's only that's the anything in my mind. And then um that is reflected in everything else once we stay in that anything. I don't know. I don't know.
It gets really hard to express, doesn't it, Sarah?
Yeah.
No, but I'm following you. It's that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that because when Ellen initially brought that up, I thought, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Scott asked a question and it throws me for a loop. Then I realized, oh, he's got a good point. And now I'm hearing this, and what came to my mind was maybe it's not the way that I act, but it's the way that I react. And when you were sharing, Dave, that's what I was thinking. How I react to things, just not even thinking, versus how I act with things. And if I look at it from a point of reaction, this totally makes sense.
Mhm.
But if I look at it from a point of acting or performance, then I think, oh yeah, I'm probably not being very vulnerable at that state when I'm acting. But if I'm being vulnerable, then I'm reacting, and that may just fit me. Um, but that's how I interpret what was Sarah was saying.
And we can get into a lot of semantics here. Typically when we talked about reacting, where it's reaction versus responding, and we typically say, okay, reaction is that there's no thought, it's like tapping your knee and you reflex, it's just a reflex reaction. So it's stimulus response, where a stimulus reaction, whereas response, we typically think about it, hey, we had the awareness to be able to put a thought in there and to consider the response that we're going to give. It's just not a knee-jerk reaction. So how that was relating to how the terms you were using, you know, that's up to you. But if you knew what you were saying, even if it's not clear to us, that's okay. But when we hear all these different takes, we got Scott and we got Ellen and Tony and Sarah, we're talking about all these different things. Just kind of take it in, try to understand the each person's context and where they're coming from. But what you're going to be doing is kind of taking all this stuff and seeing if there's something that you can assemble for yourself out of all of this. Adding in your own reading, adding in your own experience. These are more pieces, kind of like puzzles on the table. What fits, what doesn't, what do you need to put off to the side for a while? because it's not that you know you're going to take one of these and one size fits all, certainly, although maybe it does work that way for you, at least for a time being. But just take all this stuff in and get a sense of it, kind of steep in it, and then see how it reassembles for what you need to take your next contemplative steps. And so that's the beauty of all these different takes as we're trying to express, you know, our experience or what we think is coming off the page, um, and then do what you do with it, right?
Hmm.
One of the things I was thinking about when we're talking about the how and the what, contemplative practice, since the whole point of it is to step away from your egoic consciousness, all the whats in life are contained in the egoic consciousness. So when you step away from it, you're swimming in how. It's all how at that point. There's no more what. And when the what pops in, what are you supposed to do, right? Return to your breath, say your sacred word, let it go, displace it. You know, the whats are what are going to trip us up because those are precipitating thoughts. We grab onto those, we cling to those, and they become more of our glass ceiling. So when we step out into a real contemplative space, we're really, it's all how. It's just the how of how we relate, how we're present. And so
Yeah, I
that's
picked
the
up
word.
on what Scott was saying too, Dave, a little bit what you were saying, Scott. I wrote down, how do I approach anything? So how do I approach anything? Am I going to approach it with a sense of reasonableness? Am I going to react to something? How do I approach anything? And another plug, William, for Enneagram. I mean, your Enneagram number often will tell you how you show up for life. So people may choose different ways to approach something, and
Hmm.
they could be very different for each person.
Mhm.
Whether that's contemplative or not, I don't know, but I guess it has to be. It's still you. So,
Hmm.
I love that phrase, how you show up for life. That's really powerful.
Hmm.
So I think we're getting it. I think, you know,
Hmm.
all this stuff, we're starting to hone in on what he's trying to say. And like I said, on first read, just like Scott, this appears overbroad and not really descriptive of life. But if we bring it back, we can see how it does express at least something within, you know, the contemplative experience that can be helpful for us, you know, as we're moving forward. So what we're trying to do in contemplation is to develop a how we show up for life, all the
Hmm.
moments of our life, in a way that is connective, in a way that does not put any defense between us and other, so that we really do have, you know, I thou relationships. You know, that's what we're looking for, and that kind of connection. And then that how, once we've really internalized it, then that characterizes everything we do, from the
Hmm.
jobs we do to our closest relationships to worship and prayer and everything else. It becomes that essence that we talk about at communion, that Dhamma, that essence, that life force that informs all our choices. That's what we're after here.
Hmm.
Um, to encounter one thing in its gratuity and uniqueness is to encounter all of creation along with it. And so now we're getting back to the hazelnut, right? To encounter one thing in its gratuity and uniqueness. Now, gratuity was kind of a little bit of a strange word, I thought, to use there. We normally think of a gratuity as a tip, right? But what it really means is something that you give voluntarily, something that you give beyond any obligatory nature, beyond any obligation. And so really what he's talking about is grace, I think. You know, it comes from the same root anyway. So when you encounter one thing in its gratuity, that means it is giving back to you just something that is completely unfiltered. It's just flowing, you know. It's in its uniqueness and its gratuity. In other words, just your proximity to it opens you up to the flow of what it has. And it's beyond any obligation. It's beyond anything that you've earned. It's just there. And I think that's the sense in which he's using it. He's going to use it a couple more times in this section. But to encounter one thing that you are open enough to, undefended enough, that you are conscious of, that flow of the gift of whatever it has, you're able to see it as itself in its uniqueness. You're not just seeing it as part of the landscape or seen one and you've seen them all. You're actually seeing this hazelnut is different than every other hazelnut that existed, like a snowflake, if you really pay attention. Otherwise, it's like every other snowflake because you've just characterized it and categorized it. But to encounter one thing with that kind of grace and uniqueness is to encounter all of creation along with it. An authentic I thou relationship with one thing opens a universal doorway. How you relate is how you relate. So he's basically saying the same thing in paragraph 2 that he said in paragraph 1, but developing it a little bit further.
Mm-hmm.
Right? An authentic I thou relationship with one thing opens up a universal doorway. Have you ever been in love before?
Mm.
When you fall in love, what does that do? It's like everything tastes better. All the
Mm.
colors are brighter. All the songs make sense, right? Everything changes because of the quality of that relationship, because that has dropped your defenses, that has dissolved the barriers between you and the beloved, at least. But that does carry over to your experience of other things as well. There's a quality, there's a how to you now that is open, you know, that is connected, and you take that with you. It's not just on the beloved. It opens you up. And I think that's what he's talking about. So if you have one authentic I thou relationship, it can open up a universal doorway. It's another how, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
how we go about experiencing life in this open, transparent way. How you relate is how you relate.
Mm-hmm.
How you do anything is how you do everything, right?
David, it made me think of one of the Brother Lawrence stories you shared with us. This idea of if I pick up a piece of garbage and put it in the garbage bin, and I do that for the glory of God, then that small act becomes a prayer,
Mm-hmm.
and I was reflecting on what Scott said, how I do one thing is how you do everything. And I was thinking of how I swept the sidewalk this afternoon. And and I not to get too literal with it, but I think I did a pretty half-assed job sweeping. So I didn't want that to reflect how I do everything, but like I wasn't thinking about the glory of God as I was sweeping the sidewalk either. And I think that would have transformed it into this I thou
Mm.
relationship.
And as you're sweeping the sidewalk or as you're doing the dishes, it's not so much that I think that we need to be thinking about the glory of God in a religious or theological sense. It's more about being completely immersed in, maybe enamored with, and aware of each little detail. You know, are you feeling the vibration in the handle of the broom as the bristles scrape the concrete? Are you watching all the little particles that it's picking up and the ones that sneak through, and then you got to go back and grab those? You know, are you smelling the smells as you stir up the dust? Is there a spider that runs off to the corner, because you disturbed it? Yeah, all that kind. Are you present to
No.
all of that?
I wanted it to be over and it was pissing me off
And
because
that's the problem.
Hey, William, I appreciated that vulnerability right there. I thought, wow, that had me. And Dave, you just take that to a whole nother level. But I get it. I get it. I get the hazelnut.
Hmm.
Wow.
Dave, you can clean my house anytime you want.
Hey, I'm not saying I actually do that when I'm sober.
Oh,
I'm just saying, like the Beach Boys, wouldn't it be nice, right? Mm. No, it's funny. On a good day, you do some task and you get into a mode where you're actually feeling your muscles, you know? One thing I do every Saturday morning is John and I clean the church and prep it for Sunday morning, every Saturday morning. And so we've got the routine. I got the whole routine down. I know exactly how I approach this room and the order in which I do it. And it makes sense because we figure now we've cleaned that room, about 250 times in the last 5 years. So, but you get into this rhythm and your body like already knows what to do. It's muscle memory and you feel it. And it's kind of interesting. I can get into this zone where I'm the job is doing me almost rather than me doing the job. And it's a really cool feeling. You can really get into it and you can feel it. So even mundane tasks can be transformed. That's why Thich Nhat Hanh was so big on it. When you're doing the dishes, really do the dishes. And I know I've told you the story before of this Western friend who comes over and after the meal, he's going to do the dishes before dessert. And the friend wants to help him. He says, no, because you do it wrong. He says, I know how to do dishes. He says, no, you just be doing the dishes to get to dessert, right? When you do the dishes. When you feel the viscosity of the soap, are you completely immersed tactily in the job itself? The way a child would approach a finger painting. If you watch a child do a finger painting, it's just all so tactile, and they don't, me, OCD, me, I don't like getting my hands dirty, but they're just into it, and then it's all over everything. And you know, can we start to approach our simple tasks that way? So then we get back to William and what Lawrence is talking about. He bends to pick up a straw off the ground, But if he does it with that kind of sense to it, it transforms the whole experience and the whole act. So it's not about the what anymore. It's about the how. How do you pick up the straw? How do you sweep? How do you wash the dishes? Wax on, wax off.
Mhm. Mm.
I have my ritual when I go for my walks. I tell myself I will pick up 3 pieces of litter
Mm.
and then I throw it away. I'm not gonna clean up the entire trail, right? But in my head, it's like it's not for the glory of God. It's like it's for my neighborhood. But I'm
Mm.
not gonna pick up 10 pieces. 3 is my max, so I have my boundaries. But it makes me feel good. I say, okay, 3 pieces,
Mm.
whatever, for the glory of my neighborhood, and that's it. So,
But isn't it in a way
Mhm.
connecting you to the environment, connecting you to
yeah,
the people?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Especially if it's plastic bottles, because I know some of the homeless people will probably dig into those trash can and pick up those plastic bottles or aluminum cans anyway. So,
Mm.
yeah.
okay. So it's all about the how. I mean, Ellen can pick up her 3 pieces of trash and she can be doing it, the William method where she's pissed off that someone actually littered there and then she has to now pick this thing up. And she can start thinking about how this plastic bottle can get into the ocean and be part of the gear, and she can be all over the place. Or she can just be more contemplatively saying, hey, this is one less piece of litter on the trail, more beauty for the next person who comes by, and maybe not thinking about it all, but just going through the motions. This is the way that we can start to bring contemplative practice into everything we do. Again, very Brother Lawrence, we don't have to invent ways to come at God. Just do what you do all day long, but do it with the right how. And then the what becomes sacred, right?
Mm.
I want to add about that in the first paragraph. How you do anything is how you do everything. So mine is more in a narrow way. So I want to go back to what I did for my daughter and her ex-boyfriend, because the counselor told me, because you love your daughter, you respect him. Once I did that, and that's in my head, it actually changed how I perceived him. I saw him more with compassion rather than dislike. I saw him more, this is a boy who needs help. I'm there to help if I can. I entertained actually one time because I don't want my daughter to be picking him up and taking him to work. I thought of the idea of buying him a bicycle. And I said no,
Mm,
because he earns, like, at that time, $20 per hour.
mm,
And I said, no, he has to buy his own bicycle. Second, I'm not gonna, this is their dynamic. Whereas before I would have intervened and I would have prohibited her. This is their dynamic. It is not sustainable. Let her learn.
mm.
Let her learn. She's gonna wake up at midnight to pick him up, really? So yeah, it wasn't sustainable. So that's good to know. And the other thing too that I had to roll my eyes up is because he would every now and then actually stay in my home in the couch. And I would ask my daughter, doesn't he have work? He go, yeah, but not till 3 p.m. So he'll stay over. That's all right. So one time they came home, there was a cardboard box with holes in it, right? So I said, it's either a cat or a dog in there, right? And they were so happy. And so he bought this puppy, I think from a puppy mill. And he was so excited. And he was saying, I got it on sale for $700. I go, whatever. So yeah, that's also the thing that says, no, I'm not going to buy him a bike. If he can pay $700 for this puppy, that's on him.
Starting to sound like you're fading in and out of the contemplative experience here, Ellen. Yeah.
Yeah. But see, this is the thing too. Who took care of the dog, right? It was us.
All right.
Well, anyway, but yeah,
Mm,
the dog went back to him when they broke up. And this is the thing too. I'm glad I did what I did, because when they broke up, my daughter says, my daughter came to, Mom, Zach is here to say goodbye. So I went out to the curbside, and he was there. He was crying, and I gave him a hug.
mm,
So I know if I meet him somewhere 3 years from now, 5 years from now, it's a good relationship. It's not something where I'm embarrassed to see him or he's embarrassed to see me.
mm.
So yeah, I wished him well, and hopefully he moves on to a better place. Yeah. So I'll always remember him, this boy who taught me lessons in life.
Mm.
So meaning how what I did, not that it's everything. I'm not into sainthood yet, but it's everything with him.
But he was teaching you a different how, it sounds.
Yes, in my
Okay.
relationship with him, everything with him,
All right.
not with everybody else, unfortunately.
And if Ellen were to learn the how for this particular boy well enough, that how would then translate into all her other relationships, which is back to Richard's point, right? And that's the thing. The ancients would say the Jesus prayer hundreds of times a day until the prayer was saying them. You know, we consciously apply the how enough, and then the how starts saying us in that same respect. It becomes part of us. And so it now characterizes the way that we go about life, characterizes the way we show up to life, right? That becomes that how. And that's, I think, what he's talking about. And that's what contemplation is about. Contemplation is establishing a different how we're going to approach a particular contemplative practice has this spillover effect, universal effect, and it flows into every corner of our lives once it becomes a part of us. Let's see, where are we at? Contemplation is really the art of full relationship. Contemplation is really the art of full. Why would that be, do you think?
Hmm.
If that's true, if he's right, contemplation is really the art of full relationship. What did I say the other day? Contemplation is the art of knowing what you have before it's gone, right? The opposite of the Joni Mitchell song. Contemplation is the art of knowing what you have before it's gone. I still like that. Contemplation is the art of full relationship. If that's true, why would that be so?
Well, I think one thing is in contemplative prayer, if someone is I hate these words. Someone's really good at it. Um, then they're fully present. And they're fully present with another presence that's fully present. And I cannot imagine a more intimate, a more complete relationship than that.
Mhm. And of course, in order to be fully present, you have to be fully absent from ego.
Yes,
So, so
totally.
if contemplation is the art of stepping aside your ego, then it's also the art of experiencing full relationship, full presence, which we can't if we're experiencing everything through the filter of our egoic mind, because it's doing all the calculating, you know. It creates the subject object relationship rather
Mhm.
than the I thou experience. And so, yeah, contemplation is really the art of full relationship because it's the art of stepping outside of the ego. It is learning how to relate to reality in an immediately appreciative and non-manipulative way. The ego, that's really all the ego does is manipulate, you know, and that, but not necessarily in a bad way. You know, it's just always calculating. It's always
Mm,
calculating the odds. It's always calculating the shortest distance between 2 points. It's always calculating friend and foe so that we can survive. I mean, that's what the mind does. And it's
Mhm.
an absolutely essential and necessary tool for our survival and for us to be able to do what we do in life. But if we
mhm,
don't learn how to use it as the tool so that the tail doesn't wag the dog, then of course we're always in that objective experience and we're never able to just fully be present. So to learn contemplation is learning how to relate to reality in an immediately appreciative and non-manipulative way. Now we're not trying to judge it so that we can figure out how to move everything around to our advantage. We're just experiencing it. We're just letting it flow through us. We're appreciating everything exactly as it is. Nothing needs to be changed. The moment is enough for us. Nothing needs to be added or taken away, and nothing needs to be manipulated. Nothing needs to be moved around. You know, the furniture is perfect the way it is. The feng shui is great. I don't need to manipulate or move a thing. That we could walk into basically any moment, any situation, and let it be enough for us because we're just not processing through that
mm.
organ, right? The
So
contempt,
Dave, that
yeah.
might have highlighted my problem. The sidewalk was perfect as it was.
Nice comeback there, William. Well done. Well done.
But as you were talking, I was thinking about just the series of likes and dislikes we have, and how, like, as I was cleaning the sidewalk, I had a client cancel, so I wanted to get it done within the time frame before my next client, and that kind of sense of urgency to get it done kind of added to some level of annoyance. But it's like this idea of the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. Like, I was just trying to get it done. But coming back to your comment, not judging the getting it done either. So it's not that the sidewalk was messy and that was perfectly messy, but cleaning it up was. I kind of lost my way on that thought there, but
But you know, this idea of how you do one thing, how you do everything, you know, if you are basically treating life the way you treated sweeping the stairs. You know, you just need to get it done. You need to get it done before this next thing happened and that thing happened. We can go through our entire day and our entire life that way, you know, always just trying to get through this so we can get to the next thing and the next thing after that and the next thing after. And we never ever experience anything. We're always just flying over Nebraska and Kansas to get to this next thing that we need to get to. our whole life becomes flyover country and we never really land. We never really see the uniqueness, we never see the gratuity, to use Rohr's language. But that becomes a how. And how many people, including ourselves, where that characterizes the way we go through our days, constantly just tumbling, rushing to get to the next thing, get everything done before the next thing. I mean, that was sort of the way my day went today, if I think about it, you know, trying to
Mm.
get tasks done that I'm on deadline for. And then am I actually enjoying the process of anything at all,
Mm.
ever? Or am I just trying to put another notch, check another box? And that can be a how, of how we doing one thing, but it characterizes how we do everything. And what we're trying to do with contemplation is to become aware of that process and then intervene. It's not that we don't need to do our tasks on time. And it's not that we don't need to do them well, because we do. But can we start to balance, you know, and have that more contemplative experience along with, and can we work? Actually, if you think about it, if you were to sweep the stairs contemplatively, it'd probably be the most efficient that you would ever be with it, you
Mhm.
know? And so we can have our cake and eat it too, as Brother Lawrence would probably agree. Um, but redefining the how we go about doing what we do, and letting a contemplative how, a connective how, a vulnerable and non-defended how start to characterize everything we do. Of course, that's the goal, because then we're really living in kingdom. So the artful relationship, it's learning how to relate to reality in an immediately appreciative, non-manipulative way. The contemplative mind does not demand, is not needy, and is not easily offended. Oh, there's that offendedness again, huh? That's a good list. Does not demand, is not needy, is not easily defended. The way we've been characterizing the egoic mind as constantly compartmentalizing and calculating and judging, those adjectives are perfect. It allows other things and people to have their own voices without trying to impose its own agenda on them. It takes a lifetime to learn this, it seems. So once again, if the moment's enough for you, then whatever's happening is okay with you. You know, people can just be what they are. Things can just be what they are. They can speak with their own voices. You're not trying to corral them or to change them in any way to fit some preconceived notion of the perfect moment in your mind.
Mm.
They just do their thing, and
Mhm.
you appreciate that and you marvel at it, you know. Marion is feeding the wildlife in our backyard. You know, she gets all the bird seed, she gets the little finch socks, she gets peanuts, and we got squirrels showing up, we got hummingbirds, got the hummingbird feeder. So we got an aviary, and now the squirrel is showing up. But it's so cool, Now for me, I'm also seeing all of the seed droppings and guano and everything else that is coming with the wildlife, right? And so I'm seeing these seeds all over the place. And um, but I love watching the squirrel. The squirrel is the most interesting, the way that they move and those big eyes and all that. And so watching the squirrel, watching the birds, they go and we have this fountain and they go and take the bath and everything. Well, along with it comes the part that I'm not so thrilled with. But
Mm.
I'm getting so much better at not being tweaked by that,
Mm.
you know, and just saying, hey, that's part of the deal. We can sweep it up when anytime we're ready to sweep it up, and it's been interesting to watch my normal nature kind of relax, and just go with the flow and enjoy what's happening out there as the animals make their mess, but get fed at the same time, right?
You know what that reminds me of? This was like about a month ago. The lady who was feeding raccoons. Then hundreds of raccoons came and surrounded her and were attacking her. Tanya
There
knows
you
that.
go again, Ellen. You're taking it to this other place, this dark
I know
place.
it was funny. It was hilarious, but she had to call 911. They were vicious.
I'm
But
loving
anyway,
it, Ellen. I'm loving it.
yeah, well, that's what it reminded me of. That's why. That's all.
You got to watch Ellen and William. They're going to take you into a corner someplace.
Alfred Hitchcock with raccoons. Whoa.
Oh,
Get
that's too
really
wonderful.
contemplative as you're calling 911 an animal control to come over there.
Yeah, it sounds like a Stephen King novel. And then
Wow, that was awesome.
his last line, it takes a lifetime to learn this, it seems, is really true. I mean, we got to be patient with ourselves. You know, this isn't going to come off all in one go. And we're not going to be able to certainly put a time limit on how long it's going to take us to get into this contemplative place as we may imagine it. You know, that Thomas Merton idea of making contemplative faces at yourself in the mirror, you know, yeah, we're not going to be able to corral this, you know. You don't do this, you don't do contemplation as much as you allow it to happen. And that's such a difficult lesson for us to learn as modern Westerners, you know, and especially the more type A personality you are, the more close to one you are on the Enneagram, the more that you're going to struggle with this because, you know, allowing something to happen can be maddening if you're approaching it with a how, you know, of trying to sweep the stairs in time for the next client, you know, then it's going to be a real difficult thing. But if you can just relax and flow with, then everything changes. But it's going to take time. And is the stone ever really smooth? You know,
Mm.
every time you might think that you've evolved past certain things, that's exactly when you're going to get triggered again and you're going to find out it's still in there, you know. So you get to the point though where you just you laugh at yourself rather than getting irritated by it. It's just like, wow, really? And you just laugh and it's okay, you know. But then you know what to do. You've got the tools. It doesn't take you off for a bender. It's just, oh, there it is again. And then you come back. A daily practice of contemplative prayer will help you to both allow and trust an overwhelming gratuity from outside yourself, an overwhelming grace, right? An overwhelming gift, an overwhelming flow from outside yourself. You know, and you are undefended enough to be able to receive it, to actually be aware that it's there, to allow and to trust an overwhelming gratuity from outside yourself. It then offers you the safety, the validation, and the courage to relate to everything else as a gratuitous gift too. And so once again, once you can do it in one area, then it can extrapolate, then you can let it flow. Someone who allows and trusts in this way is characterized by both deep gratitude and deep contentment, which we usually call peace. You know, that's not a bad definition of serenity or peace, just deep gratitude and contentment.
Mhm.
If you're there, you know, gratitude. If you're in gratitude, man, there's not much more you got to think about, right?
Yep.
That automatically puts you in a place that we would call peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, this last paragraph is wonderful. I think what I'm hoping, I'm praying to do is actually set some time aside every day and then include the how. I got to get my mindset. In fact, as I think about the how, I was thinking about how am I going to pack a broom when I go visit William in New York to help him sweep?
Bring a leaf blower.
And all joking aside, my youngest is thinking about moving to New York, right? So this may happen.
Nice. Keep me posted.
I want to share something. I tried to write about it, I think unsuccessfully. Or I didn't write it. Beth wrote it. I dictated it. But in my 30s and 40s, my grandmother would have said a rascal, but I was not a good guy.
Asshole, asshole.
Asshole. That Beth reminded me. There's a wonderful story I told about I told my granddaughter about when I was an asshole, but and I was narcissistic and self-concerned. And by the time I got into my 40s, a lot of that had tempered, but I was the material man. I was all about position and power and the car, the house. I just topped out on the worst I could be. And then things fell apart, which was an incredible blessing. And I began to be grateful for having lost all of that. Because on the one hand, it created a freedom. It allowed me to be free of that and free of my compulsions for it. But it also opened me up to a new way of thinking, a new way of being, a new way of feeling. And so by the time that Beth and I got together, I was on the path, but not where, well, I don't think there's a there there. I don't think I'll ever get to that place. I just think I'll get to a place, and then the last step is, up there, where. But anyway, was on my way, and then once Beth and I met each other, there was this wonderful change that I experienced, this wonderful, incredible way of seeing things. All of a sudden, I had eyes to see, and all of a sudden, I had ears to hear. And there were so many changes then that happened. And then there was the first cancer. And one of the things that strikes me about that is when I was in ICU, and I had this experience of being reassured, but I was hearing the ICU nurse read my pulse and saying that he was losing a pulse and blood pressure. And then everything went black, and I thought I was might maybe dying. And then I got to the point where I absolutely knew that I was dying. I just began to say this prayer of thanks. I was so incredibly grateful for how my life had ended, and how I've been blessed over the last 10 years. Um, but just incredible grateful, not fearful, not dreading, not fighting what was happening, just incredibly grateful as I entered into that death experience that I've talked about. And that's stuck. I want to share something. I had this big cancer 16 years ago. 7 years later, another cancer. I have cancer again. I'll be in Houston next Monday to talk about treatment and figure out what they're going to do with it. Um, but throughout this whole experience, I've had ups and downs, and I worry about Beth. I mean, I don't know what the future holds, but I'm just so grateful um, for Beth, for our children, for our friends, for you, Dave, for you. Just so grateful. And it's true. That kind of gratitude, the gratitude that I feel at times, not all the time, but there's a real peace that comes with it,
Mhm.
that all is well and all manner of things will be well.
Julian.
And how will that happen? It's a mystery.
First of all, Brady, thanks so much for sharing that with us and bringing us into it. And obviously, we're all with you and praying along with you.
Thank you.
And please keep me in the loop, and I'll let everybody else know what's going on as much as you want to share.
Yeah.
But what I do want to point out for everyone is like, first of all, can you even imagine Brady as an asshole? See, that is so difficult for me because we only know you here, right? But here's the thing. He just described the shape of the journey we're talking about. The beginning of the mystic journey is always a suffering, a loss,
Mm.
some kind of brokenness that opens you up. He had the luxury of being that material man, you know, until he couldn't anymore. And that was the beginning of everything. It's the same thing for me. It was a loss that broke me. Julian, Francis, all of you. You can probably point back to a loss that reordered and broke down the way that you were looking at life. You no longer had the luxury to be able to live within that illusion. And that's the beginning of everything. And so look at the journey that he's been on. And yet the sum total of it is absolute gratitude. And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
That's the contemplative journey. And what we're doing in contemplation, rather than waiting for life to hand us some sort of brokenness, we're voluntarily moving into the brokenness, you know, and it's when in recovery terms, we're bringing the bottom up to us rather than having to hit it, right? And that's the process. But if we don't experience that brokenness, if we don't experience what it means to step away from everything that we think is, then we're never going to be able to expand into the next space. So, Brady, thanks so much for sharing that because it's such a perfect illustration of what we're talking about here. And I hope that brings it all together, as well as feeling more connected to you and Beth,
Yeah.
through what
Thank
you're
you.
going through. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Brady, I told you this before. A man who loves Ralph Waldo Emerson is not an asshole, right? Or no longer is an asshole.
So it was in the last half of life that I fell in love with Ralph Waldo Emerson. Back in the day when I was an asshole, I didn't know. Quick story. Did I tell you the story about playing tennis with my partner? Quick story. My best friend for 45 years, Jared Cox. He and I we ran together, we did marathons together, we did ultras together, we played tennis together, we skied together. He's a wonderful friend. We went on a river raft trip together once. So we're driving up to Flagstaff to go to the Grand Canyon to make this trip. And Jerry says to me, he says, you've got to do something. When we play in, we used to be tennis partners and we play in doubles tournaments. He said, if you don't do something, I'm not gonna play tennis with you anymore. And I said, what's going on? And he says, you're an asshole. He says, we're playing tennis and you start out fine, but if someone hits a shot and makes a call and you disagree with it, there's this change. And you're just horrible. You're terrible to live with. I see you trying to hit guys with a tennis ball. It's like you're and so he says, you've got to change. And so we worked out this strategy. And the strategy was this. And this is what we do the next time we were in a tournament. We're in a tournament. We're in the first round. We go up. We meet these two guys we're going to play with. Spin the racket, decide who's going to serve first. And we start to walk away from the net. And I said, wait a minute. I said, before we start, I really want to apologize. And the two guys are going, what? I said, no, I really want to apologize now because somewhere during this match, I'm going to be unhappy with something and I'm going to become an asshole. And I want to apologize now because when that happens, I won't want to apologize. And the crazy thing is, from that time on, it was fine. So I embraced my shadow.
Oh,
Ah,
all
But
right.
it was crazy that how far it worked, how great it worked. But it was kind of scary to do the first time.
All right. So now, thanks to Brady, I'm going to have to rate this episode R for language.
No,
And I'm going to make sure that gets
I
on
forgot
there.
we're recording.
At least NC-13 or something. I don't know.
I
Very
just kept
cool.
hearing ice hole, ice hole.
Okay. You go with that, Tony. You go with that.
pretty sure that's what I heard.
All right. It's getting late for William. So, Scotty.
Father God, we're grateful for another chance to spend time with each other and explore the world and creation and all the things that we're allowed to interact with and affect our lives and just the journey. It's so powerful and wonderful and amazing and challenging and blessing and frustration all at the same time. It gives it texture and meaning, and it allows us to have these unique experiences where we interpret our title changes. And I just want to pray for Brady real quick that, Lord, your word says when somebody's sick or ailing, they can go forth and ask for healing and to be prayed over. And so we just pray for Brady, and you know what's going on with him, Lord. You know why this situation has revisited him, what he's got to do to play the game, so to speak, Lord, and the doors he's got to walk through and the hallways he's got to wander. And so I ask you to give him something that he's already got a little taste of, and he may not know it, that peace that surpasses all understanding, that he gets it in abundance, and that he finds joy in the journey, Lord, and that he's able to just count it all joy. It's a tribulation and a trial, and there's so many words and scriptures to back all this stuff up for, but what we're really saying is, Brady, we love you, and we want you to be happy and healthy, and thank you so much for blessing us with your presence and your stories and your heart. And if you're an a-hole, you're one that I'm glad and proud to know. So, Lord, thank you for our time with you and just the usual stuff, God. Life keeps lifing, and we're ever so grateful for the opportunity to share it with you and with each other. In your name, Jesus, we pray and we give our thanks and we say our amens. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. Thank you,
All
Scott.
right.
You're welcome,
Thanks,
Brady.
Scotty. All right,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
Oh,
Brady.
there's
Hi,
the hand. Hi, Beth.
There's the hand for Beth.
Hi, Beth.
All right. Good
We
night.
got
We'll see you
Richard.
Sunday.
Bye,
Sunday.
Judy.
Good night, guys.
Bye,
See you
Dan.
guys.
Bye.
Guys.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night, Jordana. Good
Bye,
night,
Jane.
Judy.
See you on Sunday.
See you Sunday, dear. Bye-bye.